Okay, welcome everyone and happy International Women's Day. This is so fantastic to see you all here to celebrate International Women's Day with Women in Payments. We are absolutely delighted that you've decided to spend your time and celebrate here with us today. We've got a great panel discussion lined up for you, and to talk a little bit about the inspiration behind this, I'm going to invite my two colleagues, Jolynn Fu and Lindsay Mulligan, to talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. So thank you, Christy, for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Lindsay Mulligan. So I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Buxy Payments Inc., as well as an independent marketing consultant. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. The theme is Choose to Challenge. So when it comes to my independent statement for me this year was to challenge everyone to secure their seat at the table, especially during a pandemic. And that's why when it comes to this specific event and working with Christy and Jolynn, we wanted to really create a forum in order to engage in conversation and speak to the fact that even though our world has been completely flipped upside down by COVID-19, we have to choose not to lose any momentum when it comes to the impact and change that we've all affected and made within our workplaces to date. So my call to action for today is that we need to continue to lean in, even if now our table is virtual.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Jolynn.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for being here today and happy International Women's Day. My name is Jolynn Fu. I am on the product manager at Questrade, based here in Toronto, and I also sit on the Women in Payments Global Community Council. So this International Women's Day, I choose to challenge the gender confidence gap. As we think of, the year that we all had, the exodus of women from the workplace, and also, sort of the trying to balance for whether you're a working mom or a non-working, the demands of home and your career, the gap is real. So, this event, it came together just because I'm reminded that, the movement is really in the moments. So I'm so thrilled that we're all here today having these discussions about what lies ahead for women in payments and for, women in all stages of our careers.
Thanks so much, Lindsay and Jolynn. You're absolutely right. The Choose to Challenge theme this year is so fantastic and so important. And my thing that I choose to challenge myself is challenging more women to enter STEM education streams because it's important for them to build careers. I think it's a fantastic foundation upon which to build a career. I myself have an engineering degree and have been really happy that it's been able to allow me to do so much in this industry. So thanks for that. We've got a great panel lined up today. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Stu Kofer, who is an executive director at JP Morgan and is based in London. Currently, Stu heads up the EMEA products group at Product Solutions, which are specialists within wholesale payments. And his team works to co-create payment solutions with corporates. Here's a great acronym for people who don't know this, NBFIs. I had to think about that. Non-bank financial institution, I think. Thank you. And fintechs. Previously, Stu had end-to-end product management responsibility for 20 plus payment systems, including instant payments, ACH, and cash. He's an active industry speaker in Europe and has held various payment industry roles, including Swift's UK board and the UK Corporate Advisory Group, and the European Payment Council's General Assembly. All fairly interesting. I'd love to hear more. But at the moment, we're going to tap into Stu's expertise as a male ally in JP Morgan's Women on the Move program. It's a commitment that JP Morgan has made to fuel female ambition and advance financial equality. So welcome, Stu.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thanks, Jolynn. Thanks, Lindsay. So as I encourage my panelists to turn on their cameras, that subtle segue, I wanted to say what an honor it is to be here on a day of celebration, also as a reflection. So as we think about not only what has happened, but what needs to happen next, as Lindsay said. And as our panelists look like they are all here, I wanted to encourage you, if you had not, to look at that Choose to Challenge hashtag, which is all over LinkedIn and has been the past week or so. My challenge was to leaders to make way for the underrepresented and make the decision actively to put them first in various capacities, not just gender equality. But if you read a lot of these stories today, you look at women talking about where they get their inspiration from parents, grandparents, historical figures, or the validation they get when they see a woman put into a leadership role, when they mentor a rising star, or when they have career progression themselves. So it's a great hashtag to kind of get behind and look at all that's happening and what today means for so many. And like me, our panelists today have a shared objective with our time, which is to connect and inform and encourage with the stories that we're going to tell. And we'll get to know our panelists here before a networking session later. So I'm going to start with our panelists there. Katrina, I see you. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your role and then your challenge, which was to those who don't understand the value of an inclusive and a diverse workplace. So your role, that challenge, and then how it might have influenced your career today. Welcome, Katrina.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Katrina Roberts. I work for American Express. I've been in the company 30 years, and I'm a senior vice president in technology. I run one of our business divisions, the global commercial division. And my challenge is really born out of often being the only woman in the room for a very long part of my career. I'm pleased to say that is beginning to change in the last few years, although there's definitely more to do. And therefore feeling quite isolated sometimes and not being able to see people who looked like me and sounded like me. And that's tough at moments in your career to not have that. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, I was asked by my leader, who's a fantastic advocate for inclusion and diversity, to lead the inclusion and diversity effort for technology. And it's sort of, I guess it's become, it sounds very grand to say this, but it's become my life's work. I mean, if there's anything more important to me than creating an inclusive and diverse workforce, I honestly can't think what it is. So it's my life's work to persuade, cajole, encourage others to see the value of including everybody, not just some people, that we should be for every talent, not just for some talent. And that's how we make the best organizations. And I've got lots of proof points of that in a very long career of teams that can be really successful when you bring diversity of thought, opinion, background, experience together. And any diversity is good. So I also try not to say people are diverse, because that everyone's diverse. It's about making sure those that don't have a voice get a voice, and that we can hear their point of view, and that we as a team represent the wider world that we work with, because that's how you build success, in my view, for individuals and for companies and for customers. So that's why I'm very passionate about it. And because I've had a lot of support myself in building my career, I want to pay it back, frankly, to others.
Well, Katrina, welcome. And as we get into the later parts of the discussion on pandemic life and future of payments, it's really cool to hear about how life's work can emerge from these themes. And speaking of life's work, we're also joined by Timea of Timea's Cause. So Timea, I wonder if you could let us know the same question, just a little bit about you and the organization you work for, your challenge, and then how it's influenced you to date.
Thank you very much, Stu, and it's an honor to be here today. It's definitely an honor to be a part of this incredible panel. Gabriella, Catherine, Debbie, looking forward to have great conversations with you as well. My name is Timea Nagy. I am a founder and executive chairman, woman, I guess we need to change that, of the company called Timea's Cause. It's a for-profit educational company, and we offer education for the financial sector, law enforcement service providers, and hospitality on human trafficking detection. I am a survivor of human trafficking, and I created this opportunity so that I can offer employment for survivors and offer incredibly deep and effective training for private and public sectors, so that we can collectively together really find human trafficking and do transactions and flags and hopefully find proper ways to report these crimes now, specifically through the financial sector, and that would eventually lead to rescuing more victims. The challenges that I face in our corporation is still just even though human trafficking is illegal, and definitely the AML aspect of it is definitely illegal, I think we still need a lot more awareness, definitely in the financial sector, in the ESG sector, in the payment sector. And I'm not just talking about specifically on human trafficking, but I'm talking about a new form of human trafficking, which is digital trafficking. So your content, your videos, your pictures are being now hacked into and trafficked and sold. And here's the thing, every single app that offers and conducts those dangerous businesses, specifically amongst our teen now, they all have a payment solution attached to them. And those payment solutions are coming from companies like ours, and a lot of companies are led by females. So I'm just really hoping that that we can slowly talk to all of you and educate you about how our children actually are getting exposed, and how you in the payment industry have more power than anybody to stop that kind of a behavior. So my only challenge today is that not enough people know about the work that we do, but other than that, I can't really complain.
Sumaya, thank you. We'll do some work today, at least in the next hour or so that we have, to be sure that people know a little bit more. It's wonderful to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to Brazil if we can. Gabriela, you're there. Interested in what you would say about all this, yourself and the challenge and anything we've seen. I know your LinkedIn has been the most likes of anyone I've seen so far, I think.
Hi, sir. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be here today celebrating International Women's Day with everyone. Yes, so my name is Gabriela Vieira. I'm the Global Director of Legal and Compliance of Primeiro Pay. Primeiro Pay is a startup that works in the cross-border payment, serving in countries specifically in the LATAM region. And my challenge is to challenge the status quo, break the glass ceiling. And I'll finish by saying that innovation only comes with a change. And the reason why this challenge is very dear to me, and actually it comes through my day-to-day processes and work, but also to the bigger picture matters whenever I have a chance to be part of. It's because, as Katrina said as well, when you have a diverse environment, when you have an inclusive environment, you can actually also make smarter decisions as a company, and you can actually choose a more sustainable path for the organization. So I believe personally that nowadays the world is very data-centric, and you can only extract the true meaning of the data, and you can only understand the data and applicability when you have a diverse corporation with different views of the world, with different point of views, and people are also allowed to speak up for their own interpretation. And the leaders of the organization, their main role is to actually let those people be heard in the right form. So the right people, in the sense that people that are dealing with the data, being heard in the right places. That's when you can see a company which is in their DNA, it's innovative, because it's not only, it's a continuous process. And yeah, so that's more or less my challenge, is to have the gender equality and other type of diversity within the companies as well. So we can also have innovation, we can change, and we can see things, as I put it in my LinkedIn as well, to see things not only how they are, but how they could be. And I think that's our goal here, also to avoid the scenarios that Timea said, and to keep improving and to have a safer environment online and in the payment industry.
Thanks, Gabriela. Leaning in all over that, right? Just like Lindsay said, to keep going, to keep leaning in. If we can go a little bit farther north now, Debbie, we have you here with us. Thank you. I know your challenge was to have leaders ensure the pandemic didn't wipe out decades of progress made for gender equality. So could you tell us a little bit about that and yourself and how it's impacted you to date?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Stu. And hello, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. It's my honor to be here amongst this amazing panel and with you all online. Yeah, you know, I've had the luxury of being supported by many amazing women throughout my career. I've spent 30 plus years in the payments and the digital transaction space. And I'm currently the Chief Innovation and New Ventures Officer at Interac in Canada. And we are Canada's domestic payments and secure transaction network. This particular challenge of ensuring the pandemic doesn't wipe out the progress we've made over, you know, the last few generations, I think, of gender equality, and particularly women in the workplace, is very near and dear to me. I want to ensure that we don't lose some of the amazing progress that we've made and still are able to break that glass ceiling. So really happy to participate in the conversation today.
Well, brilliant. Well, you're all very welcome. We have now a little bit of time. I wanted to get into a couple of different topics. And the first one, I think, is pandemic life. A lot of our conversation seems to talk about that because it's turned so much upside down. And when we think about payments, you know, one of our things here is that payments is a people business, right? As you're seeing, we talk about diversity. That is what it is. We've seen a loss of 2 million women in the workforce in the U.S. During the pandemic. And so beyond, you know, health that we see in terms of, you know, jabs and all the other stats, the pandemic's people impacts are wider than we might expect. So Timea, I wonder in your capacity, what kind of impacts you're seeing at Timea's cause?
I worked on front lines and I still do work on front lines occasionally. And what that means is we work on cases of human trafficking and other exploitation, other form of exploitation. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of the impact. When the pandemic hit and people were asked to go in lockdown, a lot of the victims of human trafficking that were just recently rescued, they had nowhere to go and stay in safety. So in some cases, in the middle of a pandemic, a young woman, 16 years old, was rescued from a situation from up north in Ontario, and she was locked in a hotel because there's nowhere else to go. There's no grocery delivery there. There was no internet, and she certainly didn't have any bank accounts to be able to even receive funding, and her service providers weren't even able to go to her, and even if they were able to give her cash, she couldn't possibly shop. So this individual doesn't have a good credit, can't get a bank account, and have no access to banking whatsoever. And that was just one individual, and that actually happened in many, many cases where victim services got completely isolated from their caseload, victims between the age of 16 to 25 who are spread all over, and there was literally physically no way of supporting them financially. So one of the things is that I always talk about, and we'll talk about this later, we need to find a better way to bank the underbanked and help them to build their credit. The other side was in the domestic violence, which I don't work in that field, but we got those calls as well because everybody was overloaded with cases where a woman leaves a marriage in the middle of a pandemic and the husband just takes the bank accounts and her accounts are completely frozen. So here she is in a shelter and have no way of accessing any money. And sure, she can open a new bank account, but her old account is frozen and she has no access to any money. So that creates a whole other set of problems. So I think, again, it just goes to like, let's find a way to find digital payment options, easy, accessible digital payment options for the underbanked and the marginalized community. And the last one is, it's not, again, necessarily human trafficked victims, but homeless, at-risk youth who have nowhere to go. So the governments announced a lot of money and relief, but again, this specific community, they don't have a bank account. So what the missions would do is they would line them up for hours and hours in the middle of a park in -20 so that they can come and get one plate of meal. And our solution was like, why not send them a prepaid, preloadable card so they can go and buy the food during the day and not needing to stand out in line for 4 hours and get something that they might not even be able to eat. And I'm talking about specifically the population that I work with, which is the homeless youth, at-risk population, they are just one step away from becoming a victim of human trafficking. So the problem with all of this is that when they are so vulnerable, and then they're vulnerable because they literally don't have their own finance, they don't have a connection to the financial, they don't have way of doing finances, then they have to rely on somebody constantly, and that person is actually just going to end up exploiting them in new ways, right? So that's how it's affecting the victims, and it's still happening right now, even though we're coming out of the pandemic.
Socioeconomic impact of payments, right? I mean, that illustration of waiting in the queue, stored value cards and purchases, some of these are just smart ways to pay anyway, but it can become desperately needed, right, in these situations.
Yeah.
Thanks, Timea. And I want to have a related question to some of the folks on the phone we have from payments organizations, not pinpointing any of those to go and deliver cards immediately, but Gabriella, I know you mentioned in your challenge about how your organization is supporting women during this time. And I know you mentioned feeling that support yourself as part of your challenge. So I wondered if we could start with you and how your organization is supporting women during this time of the pandemic.
Absolutely. So maybe some people here will relate when I say that for startups, support looks a little bit different from big corporations. When you are in a big corporation, there are very institutionalized process and commissions. In a startup, it's part of, as I said before, it's part a bit on the DNA of the company. And for me, personally, was always being heard, always being able to lean in as for new projects and being understood, being listened in a safe environment. And a lot of opportunities for my career personally came from actually speaking up, actively asking to say, this project is so amazing, I would like to be part of it. And the company would allow me to engage in these projects. And this is not with me, with myself. I see that throughout the organization where there is a safe environment to share ideas, to share goals, to share also how the employees see their careers going forward, and to be heard and to be supported, and to not be taken less seriously because you are actively expressing a wish or actively expressing a point of view. That is extremely important. And that's how I felt in Primero Pay, the support of my colleagues, of the leadership of the company. I always felt very comfortable in sharing my point of views and also my goals. And again, it looks a bit different from a big corporation, so maybe some people in the audience can also relate to that more fluid and dynamic structure in that sense. But for me, those are key aspects.
It's amazing, right? The idea of feeling like you can share an idea, right? That's a company cultural aim, but it's really down to every individual person to be sure every meeting, a one-to-one conversation, that you can embed and build that culture within your organization to be heard. And I wondered, Debbie, maybe if you have a take on that, and then maybe Debbie, after you, if we could hear Katrina's view on what your organization is doing for payments.
Sure. We're almost a year into this, right? It's actually, I think, the end of this week when in Canada, we actually started to move into our kind of home environment around, I think my team left the head office around March the 13th, 2020. So we, kind of a year on in, it's been an unprecedented, incredible time. So I think that, like many organizations, our most important asset is our staff, our teams. And so we spent a lot of time right at the beginning of that period to ensure that our teams were supported. luckily, right at the start of the year, last year, our amazing kind of tech and ops teams worked around resiliency and ensuring that people could actually work from home efficiently, because that sounds so easy, but not necessarily the case for everybody. So as we started to adjust to kind of our new reality of working from home in the pandemic, we spent a lot of time ensuring that we were transparent, that people were supported. We had a pandemic response team with representation across the organization. We instituted quiet times. We instituted activities for home life, so lots of cooking lessons, kids entertainment, etc., and a small stipend for people to set up their workspace from home. But I think, as Gabriella said, the most really important thing is that kind of engagement and the opportunity for people to be able to not just conduct their day-to-day business, as you know, we have a very important role, as many of our guests do today, is ensuring that, you know, our customers can transact. So as we were kind of transitioning to this new normal, we needed that the systems were not negatively impacted, that we could service our customers, we could enable Canadians at least to transact securely during the pandemic, which they have in droves, but really a huge focus on the health and well-being of our team, and health, the fatigue of working from home. Many of the people in our organization, many of the women still have, you know, families at home that they're caring for as we're working through the pandemic. So there is an added burden, and we know that burden is particularly placed on women in the families of looking after children, looking after elderly parents. So we spent a lot of time at Interact to focus on some of the things we can do to ease that burden, to stay connected, to stay informed, to over communicate, if you will, so that we have regular touch points and make sure that the staff at Interact continue to do their jobs to help Canadians get on with their business in our new normal.
Thanks, Debbie. Katrina, what about you?
I think very similar to Debbie. We work in a large organization with 60,000 colleagues around the world and over 100 million customers. So our first priority was, how do we make sure our colleagues are safe, and how do we get them all working from home, which I'm very proud of what we did to enable that. In 2 weeks, we got from people occasionally working from home on a Friday to everybody working from home all the time, and continue to look after our customers who were also beginning to feel economic strife fairly early on. Because the dramatic change in behavior that we saw from customers particularly impacted businesses. And I look after the technology organization that supports our businesses. So we were having to think, first get our colleagues home and get them safe, but how do we quickly then make sure that we're supporting businesses? And you think about small businesses and how they're the lifeblood of economies, and, you know, many small businesses being created by women. How do you get small businesses through this crisis? So there was a lot of focus on that, both in the businesses that were going to get through the crisis but needed different types of value in the way they use the payments products. So travel wasn't very valuable last year, and continues not to be that valuable at the moment with so few people traveling. So how do you give value? So streaming is very valuable for all businesses now. So how do you give value through streaming versus travel? So we had to pivot a lot of our product offerings, and then we had to really think about how we were going to protect businesses that were in deep distress. And you particularly think about the hospitality industry as an example, and the deep distress those businesses went through very quickly. I mean, one scary thing I learned early in the process was that a restaurant only has 16 weeks cash at hand. So a pandemic is very, very painful if you're in the restaurant industry. So how do we help businesses adapt, giving them products and services that help them through the pandemic? How do we help them, frankly, survive in many instances. So we did an awful lot, particularly in the summer, to get businesses through the first difficult stages when government funds were coming through. We were very involved in some of the government funding programs to actually get funds to businesses so they could actually get through and just keep upright. So that was a big focus. And then as things got more settled into whatever the new normal is, just the fatigue thing that Debbie mentioned, really setting in, being on WebExes, and we use WebEx and Amex rather than Zoom, all day long is exhausting for anybody. And then you put on top of the fact you've got children, dogs. My dogs are very entertaining. They spend a lot of time joining WebExes and talking in the most inappropriate moments, or barking in the most inappropriate moments, including my dog the other day was on the sofa when I was presenting to the whole of technology, and apparently was a star act. He, in an animated fashion behind me, had no idea he was listening until people were messaging me afterwards saying, love your dog. So just helping people adjust. And one of the things I've been really emphasizing, and we have a lot of processes and support mechanisms in American Express, it's just leaders need to be empathetic. This is not normal. A child running across the screen and needing mum or dad to help them with homework, you just go with it. All corporate norms disappear in a pandemic, and what's most important is empathy. And I remember early on, women coming to me who were in such a state. They were a woman who just had a baby, whose husband was stuck 3,000 miles away from her and couldn't get home because of the pandemic. And she's trying to cope with working, and she's got a 3-month-old baby, and it's really difficult. And just being a listening ear, but also really encouraging all leaders to give people flexibility differently. Everything is different. The hours people work, when they start, when they finish, the fact they may have to disappear in the middle of a WebEx, go with it. It's what it is. People are trying their very best in the most unbelievably trying of circumstances, and just constantly checking in, because this is, as Debbie said, it's actually a year next week our office is closed. It's incredible fatigue. People who choose to work from home in normal times, that's one thing, but there's lots of people not choosing to work from home. They have no choice. And even the people that choose to work from home are living with incredible strain, homeschooling, caring for elderly relatives, just fear of the world and what the world is turning into. And that changes people. And really also being very open and honest. And I'm seeing senior leaders talk about mental health challenges that they're facing and how difficult it is. None of us are immune to a pandemic. It affects us all in different ways, but that empathy, that support, that flexibility, that putting your colleague as the number one priority, and everything else will follow. If you look after your colleagues, you will look after your customers. You can't expect colleagues to support customers if you're not looking after your colleagues. And we've asked people to do extraordinary things in the last year, stretch themselves in ways they never thought they could probably stretch themselves in the most trying emotional circumstances. And we're going to have to keep on doing that, because it's not over yet. And whatever we go back to when offices reopen will not be the same as it was. It's changed everybody, this pandemic. So I think it's a very scary thing what's happened, but I also think, and it's brought out the worst in people. And definitely what Tina said about violence in the home, really, I fear for some of my colleagues, honestly, who I know are in difficult personal situations and cannot get out of their houses. But there's an awful lot of good that's come out of it. The compassion that I've seen in leaders who've really stepped up and reached out, because we're all on a level playing field in some ways. None of us chose this. None of us can control it. And it brings out the best in humanity. Unfortunately, it also brings out the worst. But I've seen a lot of good in this in the last 12 months, although I'll be very glad when it's over. I'm sure everyone will be.
Yes. So lots of good, lots of bad. I'm thinking, Katrina, of all in that there was a roller coaster of positivity, but I think caution and fear and the danger that's there within this pandemic for all of us, and the necessity of empathy from a company and its leaders, right? To be sure that we understand the change that's here. And as you were talking earlier, maybe it was just when Timea was there, I muted myself. I have a dog situation here too, but a neighbor runs a Darshan hotel, which we didn't know. It wasn't on the purchase order, but there are 5 or 6. And then at some times you just get interrupted. Empathy is important. I should tell you, so do you want to come over for the photo? 3 in this arm, 3 in that arm. I thought, this is great. So I can't get too upset. But Katrina, I think if I draw back to Debbie and your comments, right, this is about companies understanding and a continually evolving understanding. As I think you might remember last year, we thought this was temporary. And then, of course, it extended a little bit longer. And then attitudes had to shift. And then eventually we reached the place I hope we now all are, where it's about connecting with people, encouraging, leaning in, and keeping the momentum despite some pretty extraordinary circumstances. And I think that people topic is really important. I wondered, since we're all payments professionals here, if we could talk about trends. And Katrina, I'll probably go to you and then right back to Debbie if I could. If you think about, what payment consequences we've seen, you mentioned travel, and my mind went to a wonderful place. But you talked about, the trends in payments that we're seeing at Amex and small businesses with women's demands and the 16-week cash buffer that some had. I'm imagining there was quite a lot that you saw change in trends. And I wondered if you could just talk about some of those from your unique vantage point in technology. And then Debbie, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, there's so many changes. I mean, just even at the very simplest level, we've talked about the demise of cash as a payment instrument, and that's definitely been accelerated by COVID. I can't remember the last time I got cash out of an ATM machine. And you think about contactless and raising the limit on contactless and how that has spurred a huge increase in spend on debit. And then you look at, having to restructure the benefits of payment products to reflect the reality that many bricks and mortar businesses are not able to operate bricks and mortar at the moment. And how do you give businesses support and access to services that maybe weren't very important to them a year ago, but are vital to their survival? Now you think about how businesses are having to use the internet in creative ways that they've never had to use it before. I think about some of the small shops that I used to shop in person, who've got super creative about using the internet to power their businesses in a way they didn't have to historically. And, accelerating that digital commerce, we saw a massive acceleration, again, very, very quickly. I mean, what I think was incredible was the speed of the change. We're talking about weeks and low number of months, not things that could have taken 3-4 years trend-wise in the industry were happening in a month. If you looked at the way digital spend just accelerated, not just in the way you'd expect it to in places like Amazon, but in those small businesses turning to the internet to survive. And how do you equip them and help them and give them access to tools and services through to, how do you think about paper? Paper's a big part of being a small business and paper processing, and small businesses are still very paper bound. Many payments are made by check still, which still blows my mind slightly. That people still write checks, because I haven't written a check for a long time. But businesses depend on that. So how do you give them tools and processes that are different, that are digitized, to actually take pressure off them, to increase their ability to receive payment quickly? I mean, Debbie must know all about that in her role. But how do you get money between buyers and suppliers with speed? Because cash flow, if you're a business that can only survive 16 weeks, cash flow is totally critical to all businesses at any time, but even more so at a time like this. So finding ways to intersect between buyers and suppliers, tooling businesses, and that's even in the very bleak time where things, travel literally stopped overnight, and businesses were having to contract to survive. We saw certain parts of our payment product set just accelerating massively from a growth point of view. I think about some of our account payable automation capabilities. That by serendipity, we were planning to launch a product 3 months before the crisis. We launched it 2 months after the crisis hit. How important that was to helping businesses automate. The world has changed a lot, and the trends that you would have seen taking years, as I've said, have happened in weeks or months. There's nothing like a crisis to focus the mind on what matters, and it definitely focused the mind.
To focus the mind. Debbie, what did the minds that interact focus on?
Well, there's, same trends in North America and Canada as we've seen certainly in the UK, as Katrina was looking at, and internationally. So, just to kind of build on that, we have all been dealing with, the promise of digitization, and groups like mine, innovation teams at organizations, small, medium, and large, kind of, imagine a world where things are digitized. And I think over the course of the last year, we have seen incredible growth in the digitization, as Katrina said. So in Canada, yes, absolutely, e-commerce has taken off. In-app commerce has taken off. Even the in-payment experience has shifted to contactless, so that the limit increase, we saw the same thing here. So our has shifted more to the digital space. We are also, seeing huge growth in our person-to-person payments. So in Canada, we have a domestic money movement capability that Interac offers through the financial institutions called eTransfer, and we saw huge growth, both as enabling government payments, but also just in the way people transacted. You're going to see that trend continue. One area that has been of particular focus to us at Interac and in Canada has been, how do we embrace the notion of digitally authenticating ourselves? And I think, COVID has shone a spotlight on that, frankly, especially in the healthcare sector. So you will see that trend continue. Is a key area for us at Interac as we augment our payment capabilities with digital ID. I think that is going to happen around the world.
Debbie, do you mind if I answer this question from a JP Morgan perspective?
Go ahead, Stu.
But I think, we bank a considerable number of companies, and outside of the US, we're only a wholesale bank. If we think about some of the scale of JP Morgan, usually doing $6 trillion a day, in the height of some of those spikes, we were up to $9 trillion a day in processing. And the difference between 6 and 9 is only 3, right? But these are trillions in there per day. And we did see, I'm seeing some of the chats here. Thanks, Jolyn. Faster digital payouts, we certainly saw that. We used the theme of access to cash. We noticed a lot of our instant payment rails withdrawing 5 times more frequently at 7 times the value. So, turning to online, I think you mentioned, Katrina, that was the only lifeblood when some merchants or others were kind of withdrawing into bank accounts from the proceeds of those sales. We just saw, a massive spike in value and also frequency of those, because access to cash and liquidity became so much more important. But back to you all, you're the panelists. I wanted to talk to you, Gabriela. We haven't heard from you a little bit as we've been chatting. I want us to think about the future a little bit. So what opportunities or challenges that you thought COVID would present to the payments industry going forward? You're an exciting startup in Brazil. I know you have many ideas. If we could just have one, that would be great, or a few.
Absolutely. So this digitalization, taking the offline online, has been very well noticed in Latin America. I believe that one of the main reasons is because of the original number of unbanked population, which now have gained access, and due to governmental efforts throughout Latin America for financial inclusion. And we really noticed how much the digitalization process grew in 2020. It's also an effort that was being done by the region before. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to have achieved so quickly in 1 year. It was already part of the agenda of the region. But it's very interesting to see how the growth in the region has happened. Just last year, as an example, in Brazil, there was the launch of Pix, which is an instant payment. In 10 seconds, the recipient party can receive the payment from the payer, which is incredible. And another efforts on open banking and, in general, financial inclusion, taking care of the customer experience, that has been a very huge trend in LATAM. and that have brought a lot of opportunities in the region for businesses in general, in sense to bring their business online, or even international business that wants to do business in Latin America countries. And the challenge that comes along, which I think is natural, is to ensure that this growth is sustainable, is to ensure that this growth it's compliant, so it cannot be without resilience. So that means that we need to keep an eye on compliance processes. We need to keep an eye in fraud prevention. We need to keep an eye on all of the security measures in order to this growth to be maintained in a safe way. And even for data privacy purposes, we also see a lot of changes in the region, a lot of more solid processes and practices. So I think that is the opportunity, but at the same time, it goes hand to hand with the challenges.
Yep, and Gabriela, your challenge to innovate, right? Debbie, what about you? Are you accepting this challenge to innovate? What do you see as the future in payments in Canada and North America?
Yeah, I think, sometimes certainly when things are constrained, there's a tendency to perhaps revert back to how things have been done. But that is not our perspective at Interact. So we are very much focused on how we can continue to innovate and the pace of innovation. Many of the media have referenced the kind of renewed we're back to the kind of roaring 20s post-pandemic, right, of all some of the incredible capabilities and technologies that hopefully we'll see as we come out of this challenging situation. So innovation is certainly front and center for us as we think about how we're going to enable Canadians to grow the economy, because many of us are going to be focused on the recovery aspect. A big part of that for us has got to be about enabling small businesses, and small businesses are ripe. They've been they are certainly in Canada, they're the backbone of the Canadian economy. They are in many countries. And while consumer finance and payments have progressed significantly over the past 15, 20 years with amazing mobile contactless chip technology, etc. Small, medium businesses haven't really caught up. So huge opportunities there that I'm sure my colleagues are focused on that.
And I wonder,
enabling the small businesses.
Sorry for speaking over you there. It must have been my connection. I wondered if, Timea, we could talk about innovation from your perspective, innovation to support the marginalized, innovation to support the unbanked. We have an audience of, looks like, not quite 100 people here who are listening and maybe ready to go build a payment product based on what you say. So what do you think we should innovate next?
Thank you so much. Great news, I'm not on mute anymore. The other great news, Stu, is that there has been a lot of great services and products that exist out there. But if you are already in the existing place and you are able to expand your existing product lines, the easiest thing is, and what's probably the easiest for the clients, not sure from the EMAP perspective, but definitely from the client's perspective, is preloadable debit/Visa card that they can use to accept payments, payroll, be able to transfer money, again, be able to accept government support, and able to use it at the ATM machines, be able to take out cash, and the list just goes on. So these products already exist. I know several companies who do these products. It's just, I don't think it's well known. I don't think any company have been able to take the extra step to create like a massive marketing campaign and allow the marginalized people to know that these products exist, and it would actually need a lot of education. So it would need a collaboration from the private sector to the public sector. So I actually tried to educate the nonprofits and the charities on these products, but they're very very nervous to use them, and there's a lot of red tape to go through to even offer it to their clients. So the products are there, it's not well known, and so I think it would just need a lot of education. And obviously I know a lot of companies kind of are shying away from it because from the compliance perspective, it could potentially become a nightmare. But there are ways to put KYC compliance measures in place to accept your new clients. I mean, we have done this for some pilot projects for larger banks where you just ask for extra documentations. Like if you are a victim of human trafficking, then your service provider need to upload some documents about your history, your police officer. I mean, it can be done. It's just a little extra. But if you talk about how many people, I mean, millions and millions of people are underbanked in North America. There was a study actually done by the United Nations. It was a pilot program, I want to say in South Asia, where they actually offered digital banking accounts for 100,000 people who lived in modern day slavery. They didn't have banks in their region, but they had internet and they had phones. So what happened to the victims of modern day slavery a year later, after receiving a digital bank account, they had savings, they were able to actually start their own businesses, and they were able to completely sever their relationship from their slave. But also the factories where they worked at, now the factories had to pay on paper, and there was a trail now how much they actually paying the employees, so they couldn't actually no longer underpay them. So to sum it up, the technology exists, the products are already exist. I think it would be just a conversation we would need to start between the private sector, the payment solutions, and the public sector, and say, hey, here we are, how can we help? How can we make this more friendly user, and how can all these kind of pass your policies and procedures in the charities? When I actually talked to one of the largest organization, actually it's not a deformation of character, but I talked to Salvation Army when I was trying to help them to get these prepaid cards, and they said simply, we can't do that because that's not how we've been doing business for 75 years, and we don't have policies to accept it. And so that was the only answer, and unfortunately no other conversations have been picked up. So I think conversation needs to start, I think, and I think bridging these two sectors would be a great idea. But I think there's a huge market. There's a lot of people out there who want to start this, who want to have a second chance, who want to have the opportunity to rebuild their life, and who would prove themselves that they could become a healthy member of society. They just need a chance.
It's fantastic, Timea. Thank you so much for that. And there's a lot of food for thought in there. This is about doing the right kind of business the right way. I would imagine many positive views of an audit trail of digital exchange of currency between companies and slaves, as you mentioned. That's just all upside. So I'm hoping that those listening in the audience are able to take inspiration of that as they design solutions. And I wanted to think back to some of the other questions we had just talked about around change and permanent lasting change. So it's a little bit rhetorical, I'll admit, when we wrote this question, but Gabriela, will this pandemic situation change our industry forever?
Yes, definitely. I think it already had. And coming again to the point of the financial inclusion, which is so important, as Timea highlighted. We see, for example, in Brazil, that the unbanked population was around 50%, and the last study I read was now on 20%. So there's a huge reduction in the numbers of people that were financially excluded from the banking system. And this is due to a lot of effort, again, from fintech companies, from payment companies, from banks as well, trying to catch up a little bit, and trying to bring products that are, first of all, easy to access to. I saw in the chat some very interesting points about not only all the type of consumer, especially elderly consumers as well, that sometimes has difficult time with technology. So it's also to think about all of your consumers, everyone that can use your platform. So so we have been seeing new products surfacing that tackles that issue. And once you have the population within the financial system, that is already a long-lasting change. You bring a lot of opportunity for these people, and you also change the consumer mindset. They start also expecting other levels of products, other levels of innovation, and other levels of experience. So that's what I have been myself at least experiencing throughout Latin America. And it's a joint effort from the companies, from the industry, but also from the public sector, from the central banks, from the government, and from the authorities, which they can foster this type of innovation and also competition throughout the industry, very healthy competition. And so, yes, so I do believe these challenges made us have to find solutions, and those solutions are here to stay. And I think we already changed. That doesn't mean there is not a lot to change still, there is. But I think that is something we need to take into account when we see the next steps as well.
And Katrina, I'm interested in your view on this, right? Rather, Gabriela, from a new organization, Amex, long established.
Yeah.
What are the thoughts there at Amex on how this will change our industry forever, if it has, or if it's just episodic?
You know, I think it already has. I mean, when we've been through change before, you know, economic change, you know, think about 2008, this just feels different because it's changed habits. And if you change habits, then companies have to change as well. And I think what it's done is it's changed a lot of people's habits because this has been so all-encompassing. It's affected everybody to a degree or another, you know, from, you know, in some very bad ways and some not so bad ways, but it truly has affected everybody because of the fear, because of not being able to do the things you normally do, right through to what Maya talks about. The effects are so broad, and I can't think of anything in my whole 30 years of industry experience that has been this far-reaching and this fundamental. And human beings need major seismic events to change habits. Habits are hard to break. And what we've seen is habits having to be broken by the fact the world is a very different place now. And even when the world gets back to some sort of normal, certainly we talk about, you know, what normal is going to look like. It's not going to be the same. We talk about returning to offices. What will the role of offices play in people's lives? That in itself is habit changing. The fact that offices will probably be used in very different ways. Some companies may never go back to offices. We do intend to use offices at American Express, but in a different way. We're still trying to figure out what that means. That's going to change people's spending habits and where they spend and how they spend. Because I think about what I used to spend on coffee every week. I don't do that anymore. I just go downstairs and boil the kettle. Much cheaper. But it changes the dynamic of where people spend, and businesses have to change with that. So I don't think we're not going to go back. I think we're going to evolve. And I think there's going to be a next evolution when we get back to whatever new normal is, and we find a new way of working when we can do more normal things again and interact. So there'll be another wave of it. I don't think it'll be as dramatic as wave one because that was so extreme and so fast and so all-encompassing. And some countries have come out of the pandemic much more quickly. If I look at my colleagues in Japan, what they're experiencing is very different, and in Australia to what my colleagues in Europe and the US are experiencing. So people are coming out of this in different ways at different paces. But yes, I don't think we're ever going back, and habits have now been reformed. And I think there'll be a next evolution as we figure out how the way of work is going to look different when we are unable to at least mix at some level, but not in the, I don't think people will want to do the things anymore. It's not so much they won't be allowed to. They've seen a different way of living, which has some downsides, but a lot of benefits.
So Katrina, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we think about how our industry has changed, but we've all changed through this. And I think that's what I wanted to kind of think about next as we think about the kind of people, if you're in management, leader positions. I know I think about how to coach my team is different than it was before. It's a check. We talked about wellness earlier. So I wanted to go through all of you, if I could, and just ask you each this question. And we'll go Debbie, Timea, Gabriella, Katrina. I'll keep you on pace if we forget that. And the question was, what new positions and opportunities have been created due to the pandemic, and what skills do you think we should learn to remain competitive going forward? So that full round of input, and Debbie, maybe we can start with you.
Sure, thanks. My group is certainly innovation, which you can characterize in lots of different ways, but it really comes down to curiosity. And I think that that's going to be a huge skill, questioning how we can change things for the better. There's obviously some other angles of this continued digitization. There's the security side of things. There is a focus on risk compliance. There's a focus on fraud management and resiliency. But I think the one thing that I would be looking for people is really that curiosity.
It's a good one. Timea.
I agree with Debbie. Innovation, 100%. In our sector, what this change brought us is that we are able to expand our education and go global so much faster, because now we can do it online. So we can reach much broader audiences. But just like Debbie said, we also have to add new content to our education, because now it's no longer just human trafficking offline, it's online too. Like I said, the new form of human trafficking is a digital trafficking, which is content trafficking of digital content, which is just as serious. And it's interesting because people just don't make the connection, but let me just walk you through very quickly. So a female CEO who may or may not have a relationship further away from where the CEO lives, and I'm actually talking about the real case, it's a normal thing now, right or wrong, but people are now living online, right? So when their relationship is pulled them apart, sometimes they send each other explicit pictures, videos. It could be her husband, right? But now cybersecurity is not just about hacking into your account to get your password so they can get into your work account so they can see who you're working with and maybe blackmailing you for that stuff. Cybersecurity issues now rising about the sexual content, what's on your phone, in your apps, or on your kids' apps. So I'm going to walk you through this. So if your CEO has 2 teenager kids who happen to use mom and dad's accounts, email accounts, and are on different type of apps, and on those apps, because they are teenager and there's not enough education, they get into naughty activities, then individuals can hack into that account of the CEO. Then eventually they can get into their kids' account, and they can actually use all of those information to launch a complete cyber attack on your company. And now this is about reputational risk. But when your female CEO is, and again, it actually happened to an American politician who had to step down, and she did nothing wrong. This was between her and her husband, or the Amazon CEO who had to actually step down for the same reasons, right? So we have to think about, great, okay, we're going online, then let's think about all the aspects of what is it going to mean to go online. So I would encourage all CEOs, everybody who works in companies, to start think about that side of the future as well.
Thanks, Timea. So, all that cyber, I'm wondering, Gabriella, do you have an idea of new people and skills being in compliance that you wanted to share?
Could you repeat, Stu? Sorry, if I have an idea.
Yes, of the new positions that have been created. I was just thinking of Timea's answer around maybe compliance positions. You're in compliance there, right? So I'm wondering if there's any theme you would see or other positions at PrimeroPay.
Yes, at PrimeroPay, I would say that the 2 teams that grew the most throughout last year and this year is still growing is the technical team and the compliance team. the technical team to meet the demand of this digitalization and the process of bringing online business that were previously offline. And the compliance team has grew a lot, and also not only in personnel, but in processes and in awareness and in training. So that was, I would say, one of the teams that the company invested the most throughout the last year, exactly to make sure that we are from end to end, engaging and surveilling, in the sense of there is no activity that shouldn't be happening, and the company is not a vehicle for any illegal activity. So that was a big effort, and this is one of the sections that grew the most in the company. And for that, we look to people, to hiring people that has very critical thinking, because it's not easy also to find where the problem can lie, because when we grow, when the world is getting more and more technical and more online, the challenges also change a lot. So we need to be aware, as Timea said, of all of these new risks. Maybe they're not all, they are so new, but they are probably more exponential now because everybody's connected online. So that was a big part of the team grew this year, the compliance team.
New skills, Katrina, or people?
I think actually someone was in the chat channel and made me think of something I hadn't thought of before, which I think is a new skill. How you attract talent to your organization. One, you're having to do it virtually at the moment, which is an abnormal way of hiring people. I think of some people who've worked for me who've never been in an office, and I've never actually met them face to face. I've met them on video, but I've never physically met them, which is not the way I'm used to recruiting people. So, and how you appeal to people, because they're looking for different things now. The world has changed so drastically, and I think about when we get back to, as I said, whatever this new normal is going to be, what will people want from their careers? What they want, a different type of flexibility. There's been some downsides, to be sure, to the pandemic, but there's been lots of upsides. And, you know, with children going back to school today in the UK, which I know is a very big moment for lots of working parents, that's going to take a degree of pressure off people, which is fantastic. How do we think about working parents and what they want? You know, I know some of my colleagues who've got young kids. On one hand, it's been incredibly hard trying to homeschool and work. But on the other hand, they've also had more time with their children than they ever would have had before because they're not commuting. So what does that mean for what talent expects of us, what types of companies people are going to work for, the types of benefits and flexibility? So I think there's a big onus on leaders to understand that, and that the people are going to demand different things. And the way customers are demanding different things, our future colleagues are going to demand different things. So we've got to be very aware of that and understand that, and think about both in a company like Amex, which is very large and the network is very important. You know, if we go back to a model where offices are a role in our lives, but not as predominant as they were, how do you even think about also building a network and building a culture? There are so many different challenges in terms of how you lead others that we haven't even thought of yet, because we're in the moment of getting through the crisis, and now we're going to have to think about what's next. So I think that's probably the big challenge for leadership, that you're going to have to pivot again. So nimbleness would be my word of what you need from leaders, is nimbleness, because the world is going to keep on changing and forming as a result of what we've been through in the last year.
So nimbleness, curiosity, all the way back. Katrina, I think maybe it's just due to the organizations that you and I work for in their maybe age and stage, but it's certainly an important thing to think about positions that weren't previously, you know, work from home or would be office bound. There's a comment in the chat, which is really good. How do you ensure an employee is able to, you know, respect their own boundaries, set and define those when there would have been a commute otherwise? You know, do you look for that? And I think it's, you know, it's important when you have a new team that is maybe young in the career, trying to ascertain what's comfortable and what's not with regards to work-life balance, but certainly the leaders that you bring in and the culture that they will then build. Are you investing in ensuring that while they're taking care of others, you know, they can take care of themselves? It's the old metaphor of put your own mask on first, then the aircraft. Is that kind of thing.
Or when you go to the shops, now you have to wear masks everywhere. But yes, Yes, absolutely.
Katrina, you and I are both in the UK.
Yeah.
One day we will be able to go to shops.
Without wearing masks.
Somehow sunnier you are than where I am. I don't get that, but anyway.
Sunny Devon, beautiful Devon. Very sunny down here. All the time.
That's it. Southwest London is the problem, the big smoke. One piece of career advice that you would give to payments in the women that you would give to women in the payment space today. Boy, we got through that, didn't we? So I want to go in an order, if I could. So Debbie, Gabriella, Timea, and Katrina, just one piece of career advice for the audience.
Networking. Keep trying to network. It's, now it's virtual, which has its benefits, but is also challenging, but networking.
For me, I would say don't be discouraged. That is my main advice for this pandemic time. The payment industry is still growing. There is a lot of space. And regardless of all the challenges we are facing, don't be discouraged. Keep speaking up and asking for the things you see for yourself, for your future and your career.
Timea?
I want to thank you all for all the hard work you are doing. And it's not so much an advice, just a reminder that you are very, very, very powerful in especially the sectors and the causes that I'm working on. Money is the only reason why exploitation and human trafficking happens. And you are powerful because you are the one who can actually, you are in charge of the money flow. So you can actually have a lot more influence on this cause than you think. So when the pandemic is over and when our life gets back to normal-ish, and when you try to figure it out, what can you lend your voice in, I would like to invite you to be a part of this specific fight and a solution.
Thanks, Timea. Katrina?
Mine would be something that I learned a long time ago, that careers are marathons, not sprints. Take your time. If you've had to take a little bit of a step back and a slow down because circumstances have made it very hard for you, just homeschooling, suffering from mental health challenges, looking after elderly parents, whatever the reason might be, nothing is forever. And it's okay to slow down and then speed up again. That's totally fine. And don't beat yourself up about it. The world is a tough enough place without you beating yourself up. There'll be plenty of other people out there who want to try and do that. Do not beat yourself up. Live in the moment. That's all we can do almost all the time, but particularly at a time like this, you have to live in the moment and just focus on that, and it will get better.
Mine is to better manage your inner critic. I think we all have one that's seeking to defeat our best intentions. And that's something that our Women on the Move program promotes here. So it's not really my own. But just as a recap, it would be to manage your inner critic. I think if we go around, right, careers are a marathon, not a sprint. You're powerful. You have the ability to influence the outcome and your impact. Stay optimistic. Don't be discouraged. And to network. So we're going to end, I think, coming back to how we started. So how can women really continue to lean in the current environment in a pointed way? So maybe we'll go, Gabriella, with you first.
Yes, I think it goes to also my advice is to speak up, not lose momentum, which is the theme of here that we are here today. Yes, that what I would like to encourage.
Thank you. Katrina?
Say, be someone's voice when they don't have the courage or the space to be their voice for whatever reason. Be their voice for them, advocate. When you see great women, advocate for them. And I'm really proud when I see a woman that I've been involved with in some way in their career, and I've mentored them in some way, I've done something small that helped them, to see them achieve what they want to achieve is a wonderful moment. And that's just as good as you achieving that for yourself. But in a way, it's even better. So just be their voice when they can't have that voice for whatever reason. And always have their backs, be in their corner.
Even more so now, right? Once the camera turns off, you never know what that feeling would be or what it was before the camera switched on. Timea, How can we lean in?
You know, all I would say is I would just shamefully would like to say what Karen says in the chat room, because it's so powerful, to hire women who were just given birth or had newborns and toddlers and help them to come back into the industry and support them so that they can get back faster, so that that void on their resume would disappear faster.
Thanks. And Debbie?
I love that too. I think having empathy, supporting your colleagues, but I think we also need to celebrate the amazing things that are happening. So take a minute to celebrate as well.
That's good advice. Well, Debbie, Timea, Katrina, Gabriella, thank you very much. We've had a wonderful panel. This is the time where I gently ask you to turn your cameras off so we can focus on handing over for a little bit of a recap in the next phase of discussion. So Christy, I think you're there. I will pass back to you for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Stu and Debbie and Katrina, Timea and Gabriella. That was an absolutely fantastic and insightful discussion. I'm so pleased. I've learned so much, and it's inspiring to see these amazing leaders from across the world of payments and around the world of payments to talk about the challenges that we face in both with this pandemic, but in the industry as well. We've got challenges within the opportunities that we have for payments and making them better for smaller businesses, making them better for marginalized people in society, making them better for the unbanked and underbanked. We've got opportunities to offer support to our employees who are suffering from Zoom fatigue and working from home challenges. And we have great opportunities to develop our empathetic leadership skills and help women in our industry who are perhaps suffering from mental health issues or multitasking with kids and elders and homeschooling responsibilities in addition to their day-to-day jobs. I love the concept of needing nimbleness and curiosity in these uncertain times. We certainly are flexing those learning muscles and the ability to be nimble and agile and curious. And we all have opportunities to support each other, to connect with one another, to lend those empathetic ears. And interesting how we contemplate a new normal in the next year or two and what that might look like. Attracting talent, that's something that we all need to continue to focus on. And how do we do that in a digital world? How do we I want to make sure that we don't sleepwalk into this new normal without considering some of the learnings that we have had over the last year and continue to have. We've got opportunities for innovation and also financial inclusion. I think that was one of Timea's big points, is financial inclusion opportunities and using our power to help others, be it in the payments world or just in our personal lives. So thank you, everybody, all of the panelists. I want to give my own round of applause to all of you. We've been really enjoying your insights. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk soon.